Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. Was it process or politics? That's the question that preoccupied North Carolina lawmakers as they grilled state elections officials on Tuesday. They were probing why the state elections board delayed or denied ballot access to some third-party presidential candidates. The elections board has a Democratic majority, and Republicans have accused the board of playing politics to keep candidates off the ballot. WRAL state government reporter Will Doran was at the hearing, and he joins us by phone from the State House. Will, good to talk to you again.
You too, Jack.
Will, before we dive into the controversy, give us a quick overview of where third-party candidates stand in North Carolina, and also just what do they have to do to get on the ballot?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are basically two sets of rules for the more established parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, obviously, but also parties like the Libertarian Party, the Green Party that have been around, have larger numbers of voters. They don't have to go through a new process every single year to get on the ballot. They're just automatically able to. But for parties that are either brand new or don't have the same kind of numbers, they have to go through a signature gathering process. And that's what we're talking about here. And they have to submit it's around 14,000 signatures. It's based on a complicated math problem. But it totals out this year to they need around 14,000 signatures from folks, not necessarily saying, I will vote for your candidate, but just, I think that you should be allowed to be on the ballot here in North Carolina.
Now, three parties had to go through that process this year, and the elections board either delayed or denied some of them. And that's kind of raised some concerns from Republican lawmakers, right? What do they have to say?
Exactly. So the three parties that were going through this process, you had the Constitution Party, which kind of a socially conservative party that's mostly focused on abortion. And then you had the We the People Party, which is affiliated with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And then finally, there's Justice for All Party, which is associated with the very progressive academic Cornel West. And the state board approved the Constitution Party in a unanimous vote. Everyone agreed that they could be on the ballot. But they didn't immediately take votes on either the Cornel West or the RFK Jr. parties. And there were concerns for a number of reasons. One, that unlike the Constitution Party, they were only running those single candidates for president. They didn't have candidates running for other races down the ballot. And so there were some concerns about just sort of the legitimacy of those organizations. And then two, there were legal concerns over how they went about getting enough signatures to get on the ballot. And so they delayed them initially, and then finally they voted to approve RFK Jr. He's going to be allowed on the ballot, but they voted to deny Cornel West. His party will not be allowed to be on the ballot. And that vote to deny Cornel West broke down entirely along party lines, which has led to an outcry from Republicans, who, of course, were very interested in having a deeply progressive candidate on the ballot who could draw Democratic voters away from previously Joe Biden. Now it looks like it'll probably be Kamala Harris or whoever the Democratic Party nominee ends up becoming. But Republicans really wanted to see Cornel West on the ballot. Were very disappointed by the election board's decision not to allow him on the ballot and said that their decision was improperly politically influenced to protect Democrats.
So this is all played out in recent weeks. And then this week on Tuesday, Republican lawmakers got a chance to probe the matter during an oversight hearing, and they were able to grill state elections officials. How did that go?
Yeah, so the legislature can bring in state employees and put them under oath and question them. And that is exactly what they did on Tuesday with Karen Brinson Bell, who is the elections director for the state, kind of the top administrator, and then also Alan Hirsch, who is the chairman of the elections board, so the top political appointee who's setting the policy that the board has. So they were both put under oath. This was a 4-hour-long hearing. There was a ton of back and forth between this, Republican-controlled committee and then, these two Democratic nominees. Hirsch is a longtime Democratic operative, registered Democrat. Democrats have the majority on the board, and then Karen Brinson Bell was appointed to the job by Democratic Governor Roy Cooper. So, politics was obviously the main theme of this hearing. There's no escaping it, and a lot of the lawmakers were very clearly incensed at the way that the board had taken its votes to shoot down Cornel West's application to get on the ballot, and also to delay things for RFK Jr. And Alan Hirsch in particular. I covered the initial vote to approve RFK for the ballot, and Hirsch had actually more or less encouraged people to sue the board over their decision to allow RFK on the ballot, which is not something you hear every day from state officials. People saying, go ahead and sue us. But he said that even though he thought that they were legally obligated to put him on the ballot, there were some issues with that. So we haven't seen that lawsuit yet, but there was a lot of tense discussion between the committee and these two elections officials over whether this decision, particularly around Cornel West, was rooted in politics, like the Republicans say it was, or whether it was rooted in legal issues, like the state elections board said it was. They said that they had done a random sample reaching out to people who had signed the petition for Cornel West, and the majority of people they contacted said that either they had been lied to about what they were signing, or they had no recollection of ever signing it. There's now a criminal investigation into whether fraud occurred here. So they said they not only were well within their rights, but really had a duty to not approve West for the ballot due to all of these legal issues surrounding the signatures he got. Republicans have countered that and said that fraud or not, they got the signatures. It shouldn't matter. They should be on the ballot.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear more about Tuesday's hearing and about a new lawsuit facing elections officials. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL State Government reporter Will Doran about scrutiny on North Carolina elections officials. Will, it seems like there's always one or two third parties that are on North Carolina ballots in presidential elections. There were so many this year. Why is that?
Well, it could be the nature of the presidential race. North Carolina is a key swing state that really matters. And, you had, especially when these parties started asking to be on the ballot, you had both Donald Trump and Joe Biden seeming to be headed towards a rematch. And, we had done polling here at WRAL. Others had done similar polling that found that rematch was really unpopular with voters. Majority of North Carolinians said they did not want a rematch of Biden and Trump. And so, it's the market. These other candidates, other parties saw an opening to be able to get their message out there and gain some traction and, potentially grow their foothold from, maybe you'd be expecting to get 1 or 2% of the vote in the normal year. There were some polls that were showing some of these third party candidates were getting 4, 5, 6%, even double digits for RFK Jr. I saw in one poll. So there was clearly appetite among the public, especially previously when it was looking like it was going to be a Biden and Trump rematch.
Now, this isn't the first time a political third party has been at the center of a controversy over signatures. Wasn't the Green Party involved in something like this a few years ago?
Yes, and that is part of the GOP attacks on the election board right now. They say it's not just Cornel West, it's not just RFK Jr. Back in 2022, the board denied the Green Party to be on the ballot. The Green Party sued and won. The judge ruled that the elections board was wrong to deny them. And of course, Green Party is another progressive party. There was a elections expert who testified at this hearing today, Andy Jackson from the conservative John Locke Foundation. He said, back then, at the same time that the elections board denied the Green Party, they approved the No Labels Party, which was seen as more moderate, maybe even Republican leaning. It was headed by former Republican Governor Pat McCrory. And so he said that there's kind of a pattern here of the elections board approving Republican leaning political parties or more moderate, middle of the road political parties, but denying political parties that are more to the left and could be more of a threat to Democrats.
Now, all of this is creating some strange bedfellows, right? And in fact, there was a lawsuit that was filed this week by a Republican lawyer that could ultimately benefit the Justice for All party, right?
Exactly. We saw a handful of Fayetteville voters who had signed petitions for Cornel West and the Justice for All party sued the state elections board. And they are represented by a very prominent Republican lawyer here in North Carolina, Phil Strack, who really represents the state legislature anytime that they are sued over gerrymandering, voter ID, any sort of elections law issue. He's sort of the GOP's go-to attorney. So you may ask, what is he doing representing, Democratic Socialist Cornel West? Well, as I said earlier, this all boils down to politics. Democrats don't want to see West on the ballot. Republicans do. So yes, as you put it, strange bedfellows indeed.
Now, you mentioned Andy Jackson. He had some ideas about how to reform this ballot access issue. What did he suggest?
Yeah, so he said, look, I am sitting here and accusing the Democrats on the board of engaging in this politically motivated action. However, let's acknowledge the reality that if Republicans were to win the governor's race in the future and gain control over the elections board, they'd probably do the exact same thing. So he said what needs to happen is either the elections board needs to act itself to change some of its own rules for this petition process, the party verification and approval process, or that the legislature needs to step in and do it for them, change the laws around how this is being done. And he actually got some reception to that from several of the Democrats who sit on this committee. So there appears to be some bipartisan support for some of these changes. That would include things like outlawing paying people who do these signature drives per signature. That's a push that several other states have done. It's not a majority of states, but it has been done elsewhere to basically disincentivize the people who are actually out there on the street corners getting the signatures from maybe lying to people or tricking people or faking signatures. If you don't pay them by the signature, they won't have any incentive to commit untoward deeds to get those signatures. And then the other thing would just be to move up the deadlines. So much of this was happening in a really, really rushed fashion in the last few weeks because ballots need to be finalized here by mid-August for the election. And so any investigation into complaints or allegations about these processes had to move really quickly, couldn't necessarily be as thorough as everyone would want it to be. And so if you move up the deadline, make parties get the signatures in earlier, maybe that makes it a little bit harder for the parties to achieve those signatures, but on the back end, it also does allow the State Board of Elections more time to do a more thorough job.
Now, do you get the sense that any of these suggestions could actually turn into law?
That's a great question. Like I said, you've got the conservative John Locke Foundation proposing some ideas, and you have Democratic state lawmakers saying, hey, that actually sounds like a pretty good idea. So we don't see a ton of bipartisanship at the legislature, particularly whenever it comes to issues about elections administration, control over the rules for elections. That is a very politically contentious topic. So the fact that there is at least some bipartisan consensus on that is definitely a departure from the norm and maybe a little bit promising.
Well, I know that you'll be watching, and I know it's going to be an interesting few weeks to see kind of where voters stand now that things are shaken up a bit. Thanks, Will.
Thank you.
That's WRAL state government reporter Will Doran. For his in-depth breakdown of Tuesday's hearing and for all of our election coverage, visit the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.